Deep in the heart of the Congolese jungle lies the ruins of a forgotten empire. Crumbling marble halls, empty swimming pools, chandeliers hanging above nothing but silence. But this was no ordinary place. This was the home of Mobutu Sese Seko, Africa's most flamboyant dictator, the man who built 100 million Versailles in the jungle while his people starved. Private runways for Concorde jets, gold-plated ceilings, exotic animals rolling his garden. For decades, Mobutu lived like a king while ruling one of the poorest nations on earth. Today, his palace rots, swallowed by vines and jungle, a monument of greed, power, and betrayal. This is the story of how one man turned Zaire into his personal kingdom and how it all came crashing down. He was born Joseph Desiré Mobutu in 1930 in a small town along the Congo River, an ordinary child but in a land about to be turned about by extraordinary events. Congo was still under brutal Belgian colonial rule, a system that stripped Africans of dignity, land, and opportunity. Mobutu grew up watching both oppression and survival. As a young man, he joined the military, tall, disciplined, and ambitious. Mobutu was no ordinary soldier. He had something rare in most post-colonial Africa, an instinct for power and a willingness to do whatever it took to climb. In 1960, Congo gained independence under its first prime minister, Patrice Lumumba. Lumumba was a man of fire, a radical nationalist who wanted true freedom for Congo. But independence quickly spiraled into chaos, ethnic rivalries, secessionist movements, and behind the curtain, the Cold War. With the United States and Soviet Union both desperate to control Congo's vast mineral wealth, Mobutu saw his chance. At just 30 years old, he betrayed his one-time ally, Lumumba. Backed by the CIA and Belgium, Mobutu staged a coup, arrested Lumumba, and handed him over to his enemies. Within months, Lumumba was executed. The man who symbolized Congo's hope was gone, and Mobutu, once a soldier, now a political mastermind, was rising. Imagine flying over dense green rainforest, miles and miles of untouched jungle, and then suddenly a glittering city appears out of nowhere. Wide boulevards, luxury villas, air-conditioned mansion, and at the very center, a palace that looked like it had been transplanted from 17th century France. This was Gbadolite, Mobutu's hometown transformed into what the world later called Versailles in the jungle. Mobutu spent over $100 million building his own palace complex. This was no ordinary residence. The compound had 3 presidential palaces, even larger than most African government buildings. The walls were lined with marbles, the ceilings plated with gold, chandeliers imported from Europe glowed above grand halls where Mobutu entertained royalty, presidents, and celebrities. Outside, sprawling gardens stretched into the horizon, a zoo full of exotic animals, an Olympic-sized swimming pool where Mobutu guests sipped champagne while soldiers stood guard. The palace had its own power plant, its own hospitals, its own factories, all to serve one man. But perhaps the most audacious feature was the airport. Mobutu ordered an international runway built in the middle of the jungle, long enough to handle the supersonic Concorde jet. Yes, the very same Concorde that flew from Paris to New York. The French would fly Mobutu's Concorde into Gbadolite, bringing in European leaders and luxury goods straight to his doorstep, while millions of Congolese villagers outside the palace walls struggled to find clean water. In Gbadolite, reality bent around Mobutu. Schools were forced to teach his ideology. People bowed when his name was spoken. He created a cult of personality so powerful that children learned songs of praise of him instead of nursery rhymes. To the outside world, he projected strength and elegance, hosting Pope John Paul II, French president, and American dignitaries in his jungle palace. To his people, he projected fear. Soldiers loyal only to Mobutu enforced his will. Journalists who dared to question him, well, you know the drill, they disappeared. But behind the gold-plated doors, Mobutu was bleeding his country dry. It was estimated that while he built his palace, Mobutu personally stole between $4 billion and $15 billion from Zaire's coffers. He flew in caviar and champagne from Paris while nurses in Kinshasa hospital begged for bandages. And yet, for decades, the world looked away. Why? Because Mobutu was the worst man in Africa. As long as he stood against communism, his corruption was tolerated, even protected. But you see, no empire lasts forever. As the Cold War ended, the walls of Mobutu's Versailles began to crack. For more than 3 decades, Mobutu ruled Zaire with an iron fist and a golden crown. But empires built on fear and corruption always crumble. In the early 1990s, the Cold War ended. The United States no longer needed a strong man in Central Africa. The money dried up. The French, the Belgians, the CIA, they all turned away. Suddenly, for the first time, Mobutu stood alone. His country was collapsing. Zaire's economy was in ruins. Inflation spiraled out of control. Teachers, doctors, and soldiers went months without pay. Hunger spread across villages while Mobutu's family continued to shop in Paris boutiques. The resentment that has been simmering for years finally exploded. In 1996, a rebellion began in East Zaire, led by Laurent Desire Kabila. Backed by Rwanda and Uganda, Kabila's fighters swept across the country in a matter of months. Mobutu's once-fed army melted away. The man who had built an empire of fear was suddenly powerless. The ruins of Gbadolite are more than just abandoned walls, they are mirrors, reflecting the tragedy of wasted wealth, the danger of unchecked power, and the fragile line between glory and ruin. Mobutu's palace should have been a symbol of national pride, proof that Africa could build marvels to rival Europe. Instead, it became a tombstone for a dictator's ego and for the billions stolen from his people. But Mobutu's story is not unique. Across Africa, grand dreams have been swallowed by corruption and misrules. Palaces, stadiums, factories, entire cities built with hope only to be abandoned, decayed, and forgotten. And each one whispers the same question: what could Africa have been if its leaders had chosen the people instead of themselves? And yet, in the ruins, there is also a warning and a spark of hope, because no matter how powerful a ruler might seem, time and truth are always stronger. The jungle always takes back what was stolen. Today, children play in the shadows of Mobutu Versailles. They don't bow to his name, they don't sing his praises, they run, they laugh, they dream. And maybe one day, those dreams will build something far greater than palaces of gold. Mobutu Sese Seko called himself the messiah of the people, but in the end, he left nothing but ghosts in a palace swallowed by the jungle. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see how Nigeria fumbled an $8 billion project that would have made the country one of the largest producers of steel in the whole world, click on the video above. And I'll see you in the next one.